Material for the brain. Conversations for thinking bodies. Hello and welcome to Material for the Brain, episode number 7. Today, my guest is Outi Sulopuisto, who is a Finnish friend of mine who lives in Klagenfurt, Austria. Outi is a 4th Dan black belt Aikidoka. She has training experience in somatics and dance, and she is a certified physiotherapist and a Feldenekrais practitioner. Beside that, she has a master's degree in healthcare and currently is working as a junior researcher at the Carinthia University of Applied Science in the degree program of Disability and Diversity Studies. Outi is the kind of person that doesn't rush to take space and amplify her message, but rather takes time to clearly think before she expresses and position herself. And that is something that I really appreciate about her. So I hope you would enjoy our conversation. And as usual, leave your thoughts and comments that we can continue the conversation together online. Hello, Outi.
Hi,
welcome to my podcast. How are you?
I'm really good, and it's so nice to see you.
Yeah, I'm also really happy that you're here. It's been a long time since we've seen each other in person.
Yeah, it's been more than a year, I think.
Yes, and I was very happy to invite you here because I know that you're not a person that jumps immediately to the front line to share everything that she knows. But I think that there's some value in giving space to people like you, and I know it from my own personal experiences with talking to you, and I'm very happy that you jump on the invitation to come here.
Thank you so much. I'm very much looking forward to this, and yeah, it's quite exciting.
Cool. So I wanted to start like I'm always beginning the podcast with just checking how are you and what are you doing at the moment, what new things are going up in life. And yes, and like, how do you feel?
Well, yeah, thanks for asking. I'm feeling really fine at the moment. I'm enjoying the last days of my Christmas holidays. I mean, today is anyway a day off in Austria, but I'm still having a couple of more days off. There's snow in Klagenfurt. I really appreciate that.
There is what?
There is snow in Klagenfurt. Yeah, so enjoying the winter and. Honestly speaking, actually, my life is very, very much in balance somehow at the moment, or at least maybe my hormonal state just keeps me in a constant place of happiness, more or less. So yeah, we're expecting our first child, and that's also something I'm very much looking forward to, despite the general global situation. That's a nice personal thing.
And what are you doing professionally, and what is new with you from the things I know? Aikido, physiotherapy, Feldenkrais.
Yeah, well, Aikido has been on ice since beginning of November due to the corona restrictions, and for like since September or since autumn, I've been working 35 hours at the Carinthia University of Applied Sciences. Officially, my title is a junior researcher, and I'm in a couple of EU projects. So that's my occupational reality at the moment. And I mentioned those 35 hours because that means that I basically have no time for physiotherapy anymore, which was my original profession. So I've shifted away from the medical field, so to speak, more towards social sciences. I'm in the degree program for disability and diversity studies, which is super interesting. Although, yeah, my background is someplace else, but it's a very interesting place to be. And I also finished my master's studies, which is really nice too. So,
wow, congratulations for that.
Thank you.
Does it feel like a relief or
Oh yes, it does. And it's actually also very nice because the process still goes on. The written work has been done, and and I haven't been, really studying the topic further, but I noticed that all the time different aspects of those master studies kind of keep on evolving, and I start to think about things differently, or I see them differently. That's nice.
Cool, great. Outi, I know you relatively good, at least when it comes to our common interest in movement and embodiment. And I was wondering if you could take us a little bit through your own biography and the things that you have done from the starting with martial arts and ending up where you are today, and share a little bit of how things evolved and the choices that you took, and why did you take those choices. I'm very curious to hear.
Yeah, thanks for the question. It's so nice to look back one's life, with these magnificent 36 years that I have behind me. But yeah, I started Aikido in 1996 when I was 11 years old. And that was actually more or less a coincidence, because I had a friend at school who wanted to wrestle with me. And then on the notice board downstairs, she saw an ad for an Aikido class, and she said, like, "Oh, let's go there so that we can wrestle." And I said, "Yeah, why not?" And we went to see the demonstration, and I remember I was really impressed by the swords and the hakama, the trousers that we wear in Aikido. And I can still remember it. It was the 14th of September 1996. It was a Saturday morning, 10 o'clock, 10 to 11:30, that I had my first Aikido class, and the sun was shining in from the big windows, and I just had a good time. I didn't, I was not a talent or anything.
How do you remember the date? That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it somehow, it has, been tattooed in my mind. And I really remember this moment of having tried the forward roll the first time, and I was just laughing, lying on my back, laughing in sunshine. Very strong memory from my first Aikido class. So yeah, that's how that started. And so I was in the children's group for, I think, 2.5 years, something like this. And of course, my friend was very important, so that we always went together. And, in hindsight, I cannot tell you what it was that I liked so much about it as a child, because, the philosophy or something, it was not explicit. I don't think it was in any way explicit, or, I didn't have much understanding for learning to move in a certain way or something like this. Maybe it was just fun, and I liked the teachers, and I probably had a crush on one of the male teachers, and and I had my friend and all those things. And and then when I moved on to adults, there was just something that kept me there. I just couldn't stop. So yeah, when you don't stop, then you continue.
That's a good observation.
Yeah, it's right. It's the same, the same applies to me staying in Austria. I'm still here. I haven't gone back to Finland, so I'm still here. But yeah, that's it for Aikido. And then I really, as a teenager in high school, I practiced 6 times a week, because I was basically obsessed with the art. And then much later, actually, somatics came into the picture. So in my hometown, it's a coincidence that it's in my hometown. There's a education in dance and somatics, which is a 1-year education leading to no kind of certification, at least back in the days. And I think nowadays it's the same thing. So yeah, that's kind of my movement background in a nutshell. And then
what did you do? What did you do in this school for somatics and dance? What was the topics that you studied there?
I think the main point is kind of, because it's open for anyone who is interested. So I think the main point is kind of get to know yourself better. The big topic is self-knowledge. And then you approach it with different somatic methods. Like I remember, we wouldn't have dance classes in that sense, or no technique classes, but we had regular authentic movement and contact improvisation, and then different kinds of workshops on, group movement stuff, which that was my favorite one, and 5 rhythms and stuff like that, aspects from social pedagogy, and a big soup of different things. And the idea is that when you get to know yourself better through these different somatic methods, then you know, no matter what your professional field is, then you can kind of put more of yourself into the work. That would be maybe one way of putting it.
Very interesting. I also studied in I would say similar mindset, a little bit maybe more focus on dance, but also in a school that was my first experience of a school that is open for everybody. That's not very common in the world of dance and somatics, to have the ability to do a full program.
Yeah, that's actually interesting. Yeah, this program really it exists still today. It has changed slightly. Its structure has changed slightly. It's more modular nowadays, I think. But yeah, it's still there, and it's open for everybody.
Yeah, and how did you end up in Austria, and physiotherapy? Where did that start?
Yeah, thanks for reminding me about the second part of the question. So originally I studied sociology, actually. So I was into social sciences, but then I felt that at the university, I didn't know what to do with those studies. And then I had always been interested in the medical field, but I considered myself too stupid to become a doctor, and too afraid of pointy things, especially when you have to stick them into people. So then physiotherapy was kind of what was left. So I switched from sociology to physiotherapy. And I ended up in Austria actually already before my studies, because after graduating from high school, I went interrailing, and I met a German-Finnish family living in Austria looking for an au pair. That was 2003, I think. And then I went to visit them because they were an Aikido family as well. And then they asked if I would like to stay, and I thought about it for 2 seconds, and I said yes, sure. And I finished my trip, and then I went back there, and that was my first contact with Austria. I stayed here, I think, for 5 months or 6 months or something like this, and then this contact with the family stayed, and I would visit them on a yearly basis. And then it's soon 8 years ago that I then came and stayed. Yeah, time really flies,
And did you start practicing physiotherapy in Austria?
Yes and no. So I had a little bit of work experience from Finland, but only actually just a couple of months, to be honest. And then when I came here, the first 5 years I worked as a physio with musculoskeletal patients in a private practice of a doctor. And
then what made you start studying Feldenkrais? Because that's something that made also our relationship more frequent because of the visits in Vienna.
That's true. So Feldenkrais, that started in 2015, and I remember that as a physiotherapist, I had a feeling that I have to train myself further somehow, and I think it was always a struggle for me to identify myself as a physiotherapist. I was also very unhappy with this, causing pain to people, or somehow seeing everything from the outside. Maybe that's one way of putting it. And I found this Canadian guy. No, sorry, he's in Seattle, so he's US American, Todd Hargrove, who was and still is a Feldenkrais practitioner, and he would write a lot about chronic pain or persistent pain. And that got me interested. And I think in general also this Feldenkrais approach. And I have to admit that was not my first contact with Feldenkrais. Also in this education for dance and somatics, we had Malcolm Manning teaching us Feldenkrais. So that had also sparked my interest. And there's still to this day, there's no professional or teacher training in Feldenkrais in Finland. So
So that was the opportunity to do it actually in Austria.
That was the opportunity then, because I was living in Villach at the time, and it was 4-hour train ride to Vienna to take the training. And then, that was also probably something more or less the first time for me when I would do something which I was really interested in, and I really wanted to do it, and I had to pay for it. Because in Finland, all the education is free. Back in the days, this education in dance and somatics, it was also, I don't think it cost anything. I even probably got a grant from the government, to do it or something like this. But I come from a background where my dreams are kind of quite modest. So I think that Feldenkrais training, deciding to go there, and also trusting that I will get the finances together and all of that. I think that was the first time that it happened.
Oh, it's interesting the comment about Finland and how it works, and the kind of different drives that we have when we need to struggle. No.
Yeah,
struggle to a certain degree. No, it's not. It's probably wasn't the end of the world, but it does put you in a bit more pressure.
Yeah, I think that that's definitely an interesting topic, or something that I've been thinking about myself lately a lot. And also, just shortly, if I may mention, also these master studies, it was a completely online studies. I did it for a Finnish University of Applied Sciences, and again, it doesn't cost anything. But it was one of the reasons why I wanted to do it. It was in the topic of active aging, and that's a topic which is very relevant for all of us now and in the future. But one of the reasons I wanted to do those studies was to challenge myself again, and to put myself to the discomfort zone, or outside my comfort zone. And that's what happened.
So let's go a little bit back into the past, and to a certain degree also to the present, because maybe one thing that you didn't mention, and I know, and I will maybe mention, is that beside practicing Aikido, you also eventually got your black belt and started also teaching actively, and still practicing and teaching. Although now Corona, of course, have stopped this.
Yeah.
But why martial arts? So you describe a little bit the choice as a kid, with the coincidence and this kind of the naive things of fun, sun, maybe some nice trainer that you can aspire to be next to. But what kept you during the years doing martial arts, doing Aikido?
That's such a good question. Well, one thing is that it's just easier to, or at least for me, it was easier to keep on doing what I was already doing instead of looking for something new. It's easier not to change, kind of. There's something, I think I was like, when the philosophy, when I became more aware of the philosophy, that was also something that I was interested in, because there are no competitions, and it's not about winning someone. I think that appealed to me. And there's also a very special feeling and bodily sensation that I get from a good practice, which has to do with the fact that your partner listens to you and you are not being forced to do things. I mean, we have there is this idea of guiding or leading your partner by using these locks, which are then painful. By locks, I mean manipulating joints, thereby causing pain, and thereby guiding your partner. But we are also advised to as the uke, as the receiver of the technique, kind of not to wait for the limit, but adjust already much earlier. So it's it's impossible to put a bodily sensation or experience into words, because it's like describing the color orange to a person who has never seen orange. To quote Moshe Feldenkrais, or how do you describe a taste you have never tasted?
Yeah, it's very difficult.
Yeah. So there's this, and the thing is, it doesn't happen always. There are also practices where you feel like, or partners with whom you feel like, I'm being mistreated, or I'm letting myself being mistreated, or I don't know how to take care of myself right now, or stuff like that. But for the most part, and for the most part, it's pleasurable, and it's really pleasurable, and I don't know where else to get that feeling or that sensation.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I can also relate to that when you have a specific practice, especially partner practice, and each partner practice offers a certain context that leads to certain physical experiences, and it's very hard to replicate it anywhere else. So it becomes kind of okay, when you want your, like your Aikido hit, you have to go to the to the dojo and do that because you cannot generate it elsewhere. But but beside that, I'm curious, like, because even though that, or maybe I'll phrase it differently, because I phrased it in my mind, and now I think there's a different way of asking it. So you described Aikido as something that is in its heart non-competitive and collaborative. But Aikido is part of a bigger umbrella that's called martial arts. And martial arts, to a certain degree, are practices that helps us to be comfortable in discomfort. And how do you see it within the Aikido practice and within your relationship to Aikido? What is your relationship to discomfort?
Well, I mentioned earlier that actually I'm not looking for pain, or pain is something that I don't, I rather adjust before it comes to pain. I think that's probably also something that, because I'm just thinking about what people who have then started in their later age, or who maybe come from a more competitive background, often it is said that the uke role, the receiver role, can be difficult because you have to kind of, in a certain way, give in, and you land on your stomach, landing on your stomach, or you are being thrown. But I don't know, I never, maybe because I started so early, I never conceptualized it as discomfort, or losing, or it was never there was never a negative connotation to that. I enjoy the receiver role much more even nowadays. But your question was, what is my relationship with discomfort?
As a result of the type of training that you did in Aikido, because to a certain degree, at least from what I've seen, you're still executing things that you can practice them for years and become better at them. But still, when you're being flipped around by your partner, and you keep landing on the ground with, maybe even if you have really, really good ukemi falling practice, still, like, there is a certain challenge, and I would describe it as a certain discomfort. And again, maybe for you it's not like that.
I also think that because Aikido doesn't have competitions, or at least the way that I practice it, or we practice it in our dojo, there's also, like, nobody's looking at the watch like, okay, 2 more minutes, go, or keep your heart rate up, or there's like this aspect is missing completely. It's not training in that sense that people train to get better cardio, or more muscle or whatever. So I'm probably somebody who kind of slows down before it gets too exhausting or too exerting. I also have to admit that the dojo where I practice, the tatami is quite soft, and I'm not sure if I'm answering your question at all, but yes, I realized that it's hard for me to kind of find discomfort in that. Like physical discomfort. For me, the discomfort is then much more like classically, here.
And what is no, and I think to a certain degree I didn't mean that it has to be physical discomfort.
Yeah.
Maybe I was not that clear with my question because I described a physical situation, but what is the difficult that you're experiencing? Because also just practicing the same thing for so many years, even if you're riding a certain inertia, and you say yes, it's easier than completely changing. There's still a lot of difficulty that can rise just by doing the same and being in the same places. And I wonder, like, how did it shape your relationship with Aikido and with your role as a teacher, as a practitioner?
Yeah, that's true. You didn't it was me who I thought about discomfort in physical terms. Well, first of all, I have to admit that there have been times where I have been thinking, like, what's the use? Why am I doing this? Why do I come here and put myself now into the situations which are not so pleasant? Nobody's forcing me. But I guess then that discomfort has never lasted long enough for me to kind of lose hope, or for me not to notice that a change takes place. Like so that after more than 20 years, I can kind of put the discomfort into a relation. I can see it like within a longer time frame, for example, and not get so bothered about it. And actually, when it comes to learning, if you just actually, like, nowadays, I think that I'm probably not learning much if everything is just easy the whole time. I can actually, now I remember one particular practice in Japan, where I was, I don't know, what was I, second dan or third dan or something, and I was practicing with a young guy, and the technique that we were supposed to do, it just, like, nothing happened, and I was so frustrated, and I felt like I'm so crap, and no, actually it's my partner's fault, and all these, this is the classical thing in Aikido, right? And then I think I also got some extra instruction from my teacher and whatever. But then towards the end of working with my partner, it shifted. Something changed. And I remember thinking after that practice that was a good practice. It was, who cares if I managed to do the technique or the way that it was shown or not. But
you said something that I want to repeat it, like that the discomfort didn't last long enough that I want to be able to see the little changes.
Yeah.
And I think that's a pretty interesting point, because I think the moment you stop looking at things, let's say the moment you look at discomfort as something static and not as something that has like different intensities and different manifestation, then it's really hard to maybe actually contain it, no?
Yeah, that's true. And also something that you said earlier about martial arts being arts where you put yourself into discomforting situations, or where you confront yourself with discomfort. I also really like this idea, and I think I've also learned about you from you about it. This idea of always, like, never seeing any situation as a complete dead end, or that that you always have some space to choose. Maybe that's it. Like, even if you are pinned down, you can still breathe, or like I enjoy those moments as an uke, as a receiver, because that's the moment where I can rest.
Beautiful.
So
no, it's like when I hear you say these things like that, I think it's really applicable to day-to-day life, no? Like, to really remind yourself that no matter what consequence you find yourself, there is certain rooms for choices, so that you're not a complete victim or a complete incapable, you're still capable, no?
Yeah, exactly. And I think this is also at least one type of discomfort, when I was pointing at my head, that when I forget that's maybe the moment when it gets discomforting. When I often experience it as my perspective, like closing down, like really losing the space, literally. But if I can keep it, then.
And do you think that to a certain degree, something within your own practice helps you with that? Or is it something that you have to remind yourself that is external to the physical practice? Or do you see some connection between the two? With the ability not to get, into this tunnel vision and keep yourself open?
I never thought about it. I don't know. I have to admit that there are situations where it's easier to maintain. And then there are situations where it's really difficult, where I, it has to do with me making myself smaller than what I actually am, or being too afraid, or, being too busy with my internal dialogue or stuff like that. That's when it happens. And I think the only thing, the most important thing for me is actually to practice self-compassion. That's what helps me to not to fall into that pit, so to speak.
And do you have, so to say, a way of doing it, or is it some intuitive way, or like how do you practice self-compassion? Because I think it's for me, when I hear such things, I'm always curious, like, okay, so what's the application? In the sense that, if I'm listening now to the podcast and I hear you're saying it, so I can maybe say, wow, yeah, it's great. But then how?
Yeah, exactly.
What's your how for self-compassion?
Yeah, well, I have to admit that it's also a fairly new thing for me to practice that. And I definitely, I am not very consequent, would be the German word. It's not something that I do regularly or that I have a routine for. But if I think about the Aikido practice and the moments, where it's necessary, it's really a good question, Matan. Because sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I cannot say that it works always. But I think first step is realizing that I am frustrated, or that yes, I sense myself, or I perceive myself being in a situation where I almost have no space. And then I ask myself, well, actually, what's the belief you are holding on to in this moment? Why do you think that as an Aikido black belt, you shouldn't be in this kind of situation, or you should have been better, or whatever? Those are the thoughts that I then look at, and then, sometimes I'm able to say, okay, that's it. Well, who cares? And sometimes I feel like, oh, no.
I know the second side.
Yeah, because for me, it relates a lot to the question of, or what's super interesting for me in Aikido is this balance between, adapting and molding, but, not losing yourself completely and being a wet rag, which can be manipulated in any way. This is a very personal topic for me.
Can you share a bit more?
Oh.
You brought yourself into that situation.
Yes, that's true. You're right. See, this is very Aikido way, where does the interview partner want to go? So let her go there. So it's actually, it's interesting, because earlier I mentioned that I actually like the uke part, the receiver part, more than the nage or tori part. And it has to do with this, that as for me, it's somehow easier to adapt than to be assertive. There's actually, I am now not giving you a straight answer to your question, but I would like to, there's one type of practice I would like to do more of because it's very challenging for me. And that's the practice of doing counter techniques, which is a really subtle art if you want to do it in a way that you don't force your partner, but really if you are able to listen so closely.
What is counter technique, if you could explain?
So, there's the type of technique, or there's the situation where the roles stay the same the whole time. So there's the attacker or the uke, actually the receiver, but yes, also the attacker. And then the person the tori or nage, who then does the technique, so to speak. And then counter technique means that the roles switch.
Okay, got it.
That the receiver then actually takes over and becomes the one. But it's so interesting to talk about these receiver and attacker and who then, because in the end in Aikido there is no winner. It's just a different way of resolving the situation. But it's not actually, now that I think about it, it's not about the other one being better or more skilled. But that's the kind of feelings, at least for me, that come up in that kind of practice. And there's also this difficulty of not doing it as kata, not doing it as something that has been shown to you, and then you just repeat the form, but that you really try to sense where is actually the hole in the other person's technique.
So in a certain degree, there is like a lot of, let's say, somatic. You need a lot of somatic awareness while you're practicing Aikido, no?
Yeah. Yes, at least the way that I have been taught. Yes, definitely.
So I want to pull us a little bit into a different territory, but it still relates to discomfort and maybe even pain, because you've been working as a physiotherapist for several years. And I remember from conversing with you that you shared with me a little, like the type of people that comes to the practice, and that there's a lot of this embodiment within, let's say, I'm calling consumer side of physiotherapy, the type of people who comes to physiotherapy. So what would you agree with that first, with this kind of assumption that I have, or?
Yeah, well, I guess yes and no. So it's been now a while since I've been seeing clients or patients on a regular basis. But definitely, and I think it's not only the people, but it's also the way that our society or our culture sees bodies and maybe even health. Well, actually, maybe that's too bold a statement. But yeah, it's very biomechanical, I would say, for the most part. We come from a point of view of natural sciences, looking at things from the outside, and oftentimes forgetting that 1 + 1 can be something completely different than 2. Although that's not a very elegant way of putting it, but it's out there now. And yes, I'll sidetrack a little bit here, because also I think the notion that we have of strength or being strong is to put things aside, and kind of not listen to yourself or not respect your limits. Maybe I think that's also a generational thing. Like if I think about my own parents, or if I think about the grandparents or the grandma of my boyfriend, who's now 90, and the world where she lived in, and the type of work that she had to do. Maybe I don't know if so many people had the chance to kind of listen to themselves. There was something else I wanted to add to that. So yeah, what I wanted to say, it's that I find this very interesting, this idea of being strong and going through with things, by just going through it without really paying attention to how you are actually doing. And then in Feldenkrais, there is this idea that actually you want to become more sensitive so that you can become stronger.
Interesting.
Yeah, I find it interesting too.
And okay, so you agreed and disagreed with my assumption, which I guess it's also, quite a general statement. But I think what I meant is, of course, some people go to physiotherapy because they are engaging in some, professional activity that relates to body and movement. And then but even that, you mentioned it, that there is this kind of perception from the outside on the body, which I find that is maybe the main trickiest thing within the realm of physiotherapy. No, because the body is something that we experience. We are not only using. It's not a machine.
Yeah, the thing is that it's both. We have a body and we are our bodies at the same time. And when we want to, there's also a lot of measuring things, and then you kind of have to, of course, yes, well, we can also have subjective evaluation of things, but then I think in our society, objective, hard numbers from the outside are kind of more valued. Although I would say, not that I'm like completely up to date with the topic, but also in the beginning, I think you mentioned pain or persistent pain. I was very interested in that when I still worked more as a physio, and there it becomes very clear that it's actually a lot about the perception. Like pain is it's about perception. Of course, it has its like physiological and biological roots. But in that sense, it can never be measured objectively.
Can you expand on that? Why? So from first of all, from which perception do you talk about pain? Because you said that you've been following some also external sources. I think also scientific research about pain, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
So what is from where you're coming to the topic of pain, and why did you say that pain relates a lot to perception?
Yeah, I wish I had looked up the official definition of pain, or the present official definition of pain, because I think there too perception is being mentioned. And now I start to feel stupid, and I wish that I'm not saying anything inaccurate.
Don't worry, I probably say many inaccurate things more than you. So as your host, you're allowed to do mistakes.
I'm allowed to do that. The thing is that actually when it comes to persistent pain, we have beliefs that can be detrimental, or that can be counter helpful. They can actually prevent us from getting better if we hold on to those beliefs. And that's why paying attention to your words and the images that you emit with your words is also very important when talking about persistent pain. And so yeah, that's partly where my nervousness comes from. So now I think the basic example of pain having to do with perception is that it's about the perceived threat. So the intensity or the amount of pain is not necessarily, or is not one-to-one with the damage that you have in your body. For example, there's a classic example would be that you have a paper cut in your finger and it hurts like hell usually. But is the injury that dangerous actually? And that depends on the person. For a violin player, it is a more threatening injury than it is to me. Well, I have to type, so it might be a threatening injury, but can you understand? Or does this answer your question?
Completely. And so if if it relates to, so when there is more symmetry and when there is less symmetry between pain and damage to the body.
Yeah, and then that's why it's also good to, or that's why I keep saying persistent pain instead of only pain, because that's really the situation when those two, the injury, or actually there might not even be an injury anymore in the tissue, and the sensation.
Okay, so like chronic pain, things that last for longer.
Yeah, and actually there too, the last thing that I've learned is that originally I learned to talk about chronic pain, but then at some point it's changed into persistent pain, because the word persistent is less threatening than the word chronic. The chronic really sounds like that you're never going to get rid of it, but persistent sounds like something that it might pass.
Interesting.
Again, yes, I'm not necessarily totally up to date with these things, but that's the last thing that I learned.
So even though you're first, I appreciate your humble approach of like being careful with what you're saying, because most of the people that one would typically imagine in your position would be people that would quickly come and speak when they're being asked questions. So I appreciate that you take the time to really think about what you're saying. But even though that you're maybe not 100% up to date, could you share a bit more about this phenomena? So why would somebody have persistent pain in the body, and like how is it related to our perceptions and to what you said, that sometimes we can do things that would be counterproductive, and the relation to words and images? Like that's very interesting.
Mm-hmm. I think that the reasons why somebody develops persistent pain, also really from a harmless injury, or what seems to have been a harmless injury in the beginning, I'm not sure if there are that clear answers to it. The things that I can remember relate to, for example, your own belief system, or there are people who tend to be more afraid, or I think the word is catastrophize what they are experiencing. So that might be one thing that contributes to the pain then being prolonged and becoming persistent pain. But honestly, well, that's a question that I would, before answering it, I would like to read some papers and see really what the present understanding is.
Sure.
So no, I would encourage the listeners to do that.
Sure, I understand your choice, and so okay, so we've encountered this kind of problem with perception, but from your own experiences, so what is the relation then from somatic and rehabilitation? So why would I want to have a somatic understanding of my body?
This is my personal belief, but I personally think that the more you know and sense and feel yourself, and the more experiences you have with yourself, pleasant and unpleasant, I believe that contributes to, yes, having a broader perspective, or it creates more really, like I would talk about space in thinking, or not necessarily getting worried that fast, or what for myself, I find it very valuable, or I want to cultivate this understanding of body being something robust and it's actually also self-repairing, and the nervous system is also so smart. So I don't know if there's any evidence on this, but that's my personal belief that kind of beliefs are actually beneficial.
And have you, since you've started to incorporate Feldenkrais in your own practice, have you seen like your own relationship changes with the body in that regard, of how you perceive situations that are not comfortable? Or I don't know if it helped you to deal with some discomfort or some, as you say, persistent issues that are with the body?
I think so. Yeah, I think the Feldenkrais approach to me has added a layer of, or brings in the role of the nervous system more strongly. I mean, of course, we are also mechanical, no question about it. And otherwise it wouldn't be possible to manipulate joints or stuff like that that we do in Aikido. But it definitely, and that's also one of the reasons why I was so interested in the method, I think, is that it emphasizes the role of the nervous system so much. And I mean, all these kind of wonder stories that you hear about the method, they are basically based on the plasticity of the nervous system, and again, how things still can change, how there still are choices, even though from a mechanical point of view there weren't any anymore.
So maybe you could give, if it's not that challenging to ask, an example of like what would be a physical situation where you would say, yes, now I'm applying Feldenkrais method when it comes to relating to your body?
Very, very simply, when, like earlier I said that I like the uke, that the receiver part, more than the nage or tori part. Very simply there, if I remind myself of the space around me, then it affects how I sense myself in myself. And I know this is not something special to Feldenkrais method, but that's kind of the route through which I have come in contact with that.
Interesting. And Outi, I want to come back a little bit to something that you said, that you think that like one of the things that maybe you criticize about the world of physiotherapy, which relates more a little bit to a greater topic about relationship to the body on a societal level, and also what you've mentioned with this idea of strength. And so yes, we like our legacy and where we are coming from is that like previous generation have struggled much more than us, on so many levels. And we have the privilege to take the space to sensitize ourselves, and first there is more stability between people, and like less violence, and of course we've also managed to manipulate Mother Nature to a certain extent. And I think that now there is a lot more softness in society. But what do you think is is there a downside in your perception to the idea of softening, that you think that at a certain point you would say, hey, wait, where is the other side? Like,
yeah, that's a very good question. Something that I also try to cultivate in my own thinking is to try to think in not in that this is the one thing that we need to go for, but to think in continuums, or and this is already only one dimensional, probably. Again, space comes into play. So I try to remind myself to think not too one-sidedly. Can there be too much softness? I guess it really depends with what we mean with softness. Does softness mean that you kind of lose your boundaries, that you lose your, I'm thinking about in Aikido terms, that you just accept anything that is being done to you? Then I would say it's not healthy anymore.
And what would be the definition of the softness that you are aiming for, that will last this kind of test?
I really like this image of tensegrity structures, which they never lose their integrity, even if you put pressure on them, and you can throw them around. I'm having this image of a ball, tensegrity ball in my head, I would still consider it soft. I wouldn't say it's a hard structure. I would still consider it a soft thing, but something that, doesn't lose its integrity.
Yeah, because this is somehow something that I've been finding myself asking a lot, I mean, you said that you shared in the beginning that you're expecting your baby to come to the world, and I've been already in the business of raising humans for several years, and it's a constant, like I would say, it's a constant negotiation between, harshness, which is to a certain degree inevitable part of life. No, that things will be harsh, and that things won't go the way we want. But on the other hand, like, I don't want to make my kids constantly suffer. No, and when I see how you practice Aikido and the different experiences that we had meeting in the studio, I think that there is a certain quality that is very precise in how you express yourself physically, which holds this tension very well.
Okay.
And that's something that I find really fascinating to ask myself. Okay, what do I do that enables me to exactly to become this tensegrity model that I'm not completely collapsing, but at the same time that I can maintain my boundaries and be clear. And to a certain degree, maybe Aikido is about that, no?
I think for me personally, it's a lot about that, or it's mainly about that. And, I was also thinking about, because in Aikido, we are a lot in contact, and what makes a contact soft with another person. And, you could say that, some people have a softer skin than others. That could also be like a very, the very subtleties of it. But there's something that's something really, really fascinating, and also something I cannot really analyze very well. But yes, what makes a contact soft, and still it can be very assertive, and it can be very clear. And this is a fascinating. This is, by the way, also something that I've learned from you. Like, every now and then remember to differentiate qualities from each other. Like, that slow can also be, I don't know, hard. Slow doesn't necessarily have to be soft, or something assertive doesn't have to be hard. It can really be soft. And sorry, I'm jumping a little bit. This is a very clear memory for myself, practicing with you and having somehow glued certain qualities to each other, and then you pointing out that, well, actually you can differentiate them.
Yeah, I think it's something I'm trying to do with myself, because it's I mean, if there is a certain aim to take those physical lessons that we do in the studio, I would say, like, and translating them into life, which is extremely challenging. I don't know how do you, if you manage to do it yourself, but that would be for me like the most rewarding, like the type of relationship that you described, that on the one hand I can, because that I can be soft enough to listen to you, but it doesn't, but I can generate some clarity at the same time. And that's very difficult when it comes to behavior, no?
I fully agree with you.
No, go ahead.
No, it's, it's kind of complex enough when you just practice in the Aikido dojo physically, that, that's already, years and decades of study.
Yes, completely. And Outi, maybe we can jump a little bit more to the present, because you've mentioned that you have been working now in the university and working on disability and diversity. Could you elaborate a little bit more on like what you're doing, and like how does your involvement in social science relate somehow, or reflects to what you've been doing on the physical level, which sometimes people really tend to disconnect it completely. But, I think just our conversation already put a bit of light that there is a lot of integration.
Yeah. Well, actually, like in the very first beginning, at the beginning when I started at the University of Applied Sciences here, that was 2.5 years ago. And yes, like you said, I work in the degree program for disability and diversity studies. I was very interested in combining movement or sports and disability. And we have some people with disability in our Aikido club, or at least we had. Let's see if they come back after the restrictions. We get rid of the restrictions. But as such, so even though the topic of disability and diversity studies is super interesting, my work is mainly with 2 EU projects. One having started in September, and that's actually about creating an international fully online master program, international interdisciplinary online master program on active aging. So actually that has little to do with somatics, although for me something that has become or is becoming clearer and clearer is the role of empathy when it comes to aging society, or actually also climate change and all these things, empathy or compassion, the emotional component. But the other project that I'm working in, and which still runs like half a year, so until end of August, is a project called Moving into Soft Skills. And that's also an EU project. And it actually kind of stems, or the original idea stems from this education in dance and somatics. And all of us who are part of the project consortium, we are alumni from that training from different years. And the idea was that, we wanted to work together. And then we wanted to bring somatics like more available to the general public. And then we figured out that, the concept or the idea of soft skills matches quite well. And with soft skills, I don't think there is any one clear or established definition what they are, but, we work with teamwork, communication, leadership, self-knowledge, these kind of things.
So in your own words, what is soft skills?
Soft skills are unquantifiable.
Okay.
Soft skills for me, like how I perceive them, for me, soft skills is the kind of the stuff around. I know it's not a very good definition, and it's hard to sell anything with that kind of sentence. But you know what? We just talked about softness. So maybe soft skills are the matter between us, which enables us to be soft and to meet and to collaborate. Because that's also the strength that we humans as a race have. That's what I really strongly believe. Our strength lies in our ability to cooperate. And then unfortunately we can cooperate for destructive reasons as well. And
how is it going so far with because you said for a moment as a joke, it's hard to sell such idea with this definition, and I'm questioning just because, like, that's my interpretation of let's say the world that we are living in, at least in Europe, Austria, that there is not a lot of appreciation for it, and that you really need to crack some very hard wall to enable people to actually give positive value to somatics. What is your experience? Do you manage to bridge between people who already know the value and people who don't know the value and or are still trapped in this paradigm that okay, if I want to have a relationship to my body, I go to the gym, I lift some weights, I get in, I become fit, and that's it, I'm ready, which normally doesn't give you any skills, no?
You're so right. And this is exactly, you're exactly at the point. And yeah, like I said, the big goal of the project is to bring somatics to a larger audience. But how do you, like we said in the beginning, it's impossible or very difficult to describe experiences or sensations. So how do you find words to attract people's interest? That's one thing. And, I also remember during the Feldenkrais training, I oftentimes remember thinking, so what? So, okay, now I can feel my head and my tail simultaneously. Okay. And, for me, it might be like, wow. But then if I tell about it to someone else, they go like, what's the point? What do you benefit from it? And that's a difficult one to answer. And you're so right that our society also, or our culture, values so much more somebody who is in tight shape, for example. It's always interesting because we also talk on a very general level. So like somatics, if it was completely disregarded, it wouldn't exist, right? So of course there are also these undercurrents, which are more or less contrary to the main culture or to the hegemonial perception of things. But yeah, I would actually still claim maybe the change is coming. I think it is happening, but I think you use the word breakthrough, so we're not there yet.
Maybe the reason I'm using it because what I see is that it's not that I don't see people who have, let's say, somatic relation to their bodies in other fields, but I don't see them acknowledging it on the level of discourse, of explaining it. I will give you just an example. I don't think that you can be a good let's take something from that I'm more familiar with. You cannot be a good Brazilian jiu-jitsu practitioner without having strong connection to body sensations and to sensing your body. It's just not possible because you're working with physical touch, and like your way of understanding what is happening is through sensation. It's not through it's not through looking at the mirror and visualizing yourself from the outside. But yet there is not a lot of people within that competitive environment that will talk about let's try to make the next 5 minutes practice of jiu-jitsu about if you can sense your tail and head at the same time. That's not at all present. And then I'm wondering to myself, and maybe you have also some things to contribute because of the work that you're doing, like, why is that? Why is it so pushed to the side, this idea of sensing? So, like there would be maybe social theories about, society, and why are we so attached to hardness? Maybe it comes from our legacy of, living in a world that constantly had existential threats. Maybe there are still existential threats. So like we are afraid of letting it go. I can definitely see it in my country where I grew up in Israel, like that I was trying to soften up, but people around me were looking at me as naive because of the situation and the conflict, and that we are constantly in war. So it's like, how dare you soften yourself there,
Yeah. Like that's stupidity. It's stupid to soften yourself, right?
Stupid.
Make yourself vulnerable.
Exactly. It's like it's been categorized sometimes. I would even go as far as softening yourself would betraying your country. Because like we need your body to be hard and ready. So yeah, it's that's kind of the things that I came up with. But I don't know, like, why do you think that it's so hard for us to really dive into soft skills?
Yeah, it's super interesting what you said about like also for your country, like on kind of on that level, staying hard, staying alert, being ready to fight, knowing that the concept of nation is a social construct. Anyway, that's a totally different thing. I'm, I come originally from Finland. I'm not sure if I mentioned that in the beginning. And I remember reading things like that, in Finland, and I think it applies. I think I recognize it in myself to some extent. Living here in Austria has opened up a totally new world for me when it comes to enjoying things. Like and then, because you were also referring to our history, and it's so true. It's actually it's really amazing in what kind of prosperity we live here. I never had to hunger. I was never, there never were any life-threatening diseases in my case, and so it's the safety is actually amazing that we have, and it's also so beautiful to see what it then actually enables. When you can grow up in such a nurturing environment in the end. But yeah, there's this. I remember reading things about Finland that actually, the summer is there just to work and prepare for the winter, to survive over the winter, or that the Finn always knows, and I love these national stereotypes. The Finn knows that you never know, even in summer, it might get below zero, and your rye and everything freezes, or in the winter the ice goes 2 meters deep into the ground. So it's tough, and you always have to be prepared.
Interesting, because I never thought about that. We have this kind of common ground, because again, as somebody who grew up in Israel, I've been fed with this idea of like, watch out behind you,
Yeah.
You're not welcome on this planet, and people want to make sure that you won't survive the next day. So you have to be alert. And for me, I mean, Finland was just part of this kind of utopian Scandinavian perfection. And I never thought that actually, as you said, like, so maybe the Finnish story is more about the relation with the harsh mother nature. And my story and my country's story is more in relation to human conflicts. But yeah, it does something, no? Like to come out of it, no? So what happened to you in Austria, and how did you manage to, like, you said that you managed to kind of slowly enjoy life, no? Like,
yeah, finally, after all these years. Yeah, no, it's for me, it's so interesting, because yes, at some point I realized that, I was, it's, of course, it's based on my values, always go for the bare minimum kind of. That was how I grew up, or how I learned to be, like, don't ask for too much, because then you don't have to disappoint. Then if you ask for a little, then, and you get it, then, there's no disappointment. That kind of mindset. Or, well, food is maybe an example where, like, food is there for nutrition, and that's it. So I never really thought of food of, being a source of pleasure, or that, it might be okay to buy the more expensive bottle of olive oil because it just tastes better.
It's really funny.
it's that kind of small things, and really, like, allowing myself to not go for the bare minimum. And or it also relates to what we said earlier about trust. Or actually, we talked about being vulnerable, being soft, and that often means, or that, gets connected with being vulnerable. And allowing, I wanted to say something about allowing myself. The word was trust. I think it's also kind of a question of trust that the temperature won't drop below zero the next night, but it will, things will keep on growing, and then I can just lay down. I can lay down for a moment.
It's funny because for me, like living in Austria, I'm already 10 years living in Austria, and still after all these years, when we are in kind of January, February, I've lost all memory of that there is warmth on planet Earth.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah.
And it doesn't matter how warm the summer is. I'm never saturated. I always feel like, I can get more of it, because again, in Israel, there's abundance of sun and warmth. And it's funny to think like what the lack of this makes to your mental state, growing up in a place like that. And I don't know, when you were speaking, it made me think like, okay, so I want to prevent suffering. So I'm hardening myself, like, and I don't want to be disappointed so I'm like, I want to prevent disappointment, which is to a certain degree suffering. So I'm already making myself harder to make sure that I'm not going to suffer. And by that, I'm actually losing the ability to have connection to pleasure, which of course we can talk about if pleasure is like the way for happiness and for well-being, which like you also mentioned, you mentioned the word before, like climate change. And you mentioned now in the social context that you grew up, the idea of taking as much as I need and not more than that. And like we all know the consequence of like this. Maybe we don't, maybe not all of us know, because otherwise we wouldn't be there, but like of overconsumption and greed and taking much more than I need. But yes, it's really a complex equation, like to prepare yourself a little bit, but not too much. Like this tensegrity model for on the level of personality is like, wow.
Yeah.
How to get there, no?
Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned the word personality. I'm just reading a book from, I think his name is Gerhard Roth. And he's a doctor or a neuroscientist, something like this. And his book is about to what extent can we change ourselves and change other people. I'm at the very beginning of the book, and he just went through the neural structures in our brain, and he has presented his own model of personality, which is based on the 6 basic systems that we have, at least according to the present knowledge.
What is the system that you refer to?
Like these. See, now I come to what I said to you earlier about I'm reading it in German, and it's really difficult for me to translate that understanding into English. But I'm referring to like a neural system, like your limbic system,
okay,
or these or the cortical areas, and the functions that they deal with. So that's what then his personality model is based on, and he's also saying that he kind of of course he also refers to other sources, but then he kind of says that we can divide personality types into dynamic and dynamic ones, and then kind of like stable ones. And in his model, there's also a person who is exactly in the middle, who combines traits from both, like is kind of in perfect balance. But then he also writes that's very rare.
That's why I think partnership is good. It's like, I'm definitely on the unstable, ever changing, and my wife is on the stable, and it's like, you need both to a certain degree. Like if you're like, I can, like from my perception, not in relation to my wife, but I can see a lot of like that, of also challenging scenarios with having a personality that is very stable and very fixed about things, that has hard time to adapt. But on the other hand, I can definitely experience with my own behavior how challenging it is to have this ever-changing way of understanding oneself.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. But maybe I think, you said partnership earlier. I mentioned that I strongly believe that our strength relies in collaboration, hopefully for for positive things. And maybe that's kind of one of the things, that we don't have to be everything by ourselves or in ourselves. we need other people. Actually, sorry, go ahead.
No, completely.
Yeah. And, now that, because we also talked a little bit about kids, I mean, in the beginning, if you don't have contact to another human being, you don't develop in a healthy way, which is, I find it also fascinating.
That's definitely an interesting cue to what's important in life.
Yeah.
If you have no contact, you die. But then we forget it. I don't know. I mean, I've just released last week a solo episode where I shared a little bit about, how my passion became obsessions and how it interfered my ability to connect to others. But yeah, it sounds, sorry.
No, I just want to say I started to listen to it, but then I had to go to bed. I will finish listening to it.
No problem if you have time. Yeah. And yes, I mean, when you mention this idea of soft skills as something that is necessary, not only for your development, but like for approaching others. And that's again something that I think that it's really undermined when it comes to, let's say, the market. Like when I see like the mainstream figures around body and training, it's all about, like developing yourself, and not so much about how to get tools to develop others and to connect to others. And that's, to a certain degree, I don't see it as it's something that leads you really to a balanced life if you cannot connect to others.
Yeah, that's actually interesting. I mean, because I was thinking about team sports. We have team sports as well, right? And I have to. Did you ever practice one? Because I never did.
Yeah, I was a basketball player for like almost 12 years.
Yeah, true. Yeah, true. So, but what would you think? Like, was there any space for? Because I mean, you have to kind of read your teammates and this stuff.
That's a thought that came to my mind now when we are talking. That to a certain degree, humans are like, we have the ability to collaborate, but I think that we maximize it, or at least that's currently like how we maximize it, is when we compete with other group. So it's like when you put two groups of people and you set up a certain fair situation for them to compete, then the collaboration gets to a level that it's hard to find it in a non-competitive spaces. Like, first of all, the individual responsibility of getting the best that you can from yourself, plus, building the most amount of trust from your colleagues in order to do something that is against someone else. But when it's just about us doing things good for us, then people kind of, then I think it's harder. I'm not saying that it's not possible, but maybe it's harder. I mean, it's also, to a certain degree, like what you describe about Finland, I can also see it as like we have a competitive sport where on one team you have all the Finnish people, on the other team you have winter. And then it's like we compete against winter, and therefore we have this collaborative system, which is, I would say, a better competition than what I grew up in Israel. It's like we are one team Jewish, and then all the rest of the people, wants to annihilate us. Now we have to compete. Because that's already, I would say, a more negative narrative to grow up in. But I don't know. Yeah, it's. So how do you work in your project when it comes to team building and collaborating? Do you have any interesting models that you feel like really helps for the collaboration to go on?
Well, our idea, or what we have promised to produce as outputs, is a 16-hour module, which anybody interested in that somatic approach to somatic skills could then apply in their own work. At first, I mean, like I said, we want to bring somatic methods or somatic stuff to a broader audience. And at first we thought like, we would produce materials that anybody could use. But then we quite soon realized that, like you said earlier about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioners, if you have no relation to your body, or, you need to have some experience with it in order to be able to then bring it to other people. So we have, I mean, it's actually in principle, it's quite simple what we have done. We have collected exercises and tasks that we think deal with the soft skills that we have chosen, and then we also have we actually have a kind of a puzzle to play with in the beginning, and we use it to help reflecting your own soft skills and your understanding of what soft skills are in the first place, because like I said earlier, they are unquantifiable. They cannot be measured in that sense. I mean, yes, of course you can evaluate, you can give a subjective evaluation of how good you consider yourself in teamwork, but I don't know if that's very helpful. So yeah, that's what we are producing in the project, a reflection tool, and then material like a manual for putting up a training addressing those skills. And my piloting is still ahead of me in a couple of weeks. So after that, I could tell you more.
Wow, good luck with that.
Thanks.
That sounds really, really, really needed. And yeah, and again, I'm questioning with you on a wider circles, like, yeah, how to encourage that. And again, I think that personally, I would still put some importance of backing somatic with, let's say, athleticism. And I think that's for a certain period of time, that's how I wanted to describe my work: somatic athletic development. Okay, that it's like that we are encompassing both. But I think that the athletic realm is so saturated that it's really a missing voice, and I'm really happy to follow your project. So maybe, Outi, we've been talking for quite some time, and even though that I'm happy to keep on speaking forever, I would like to give you some stage to share, like, okay, so if people wants to hear more about the project and in general, like the things that you offer, where could we find you, and like because I know beside this, there's also the dojo. If you can share a little bit about the dojo and about the project, how to connect to it, that people can maybe who are interested to keep hearing from you can do that.
Yeah, thanks for the possibility. So first, our dojo is called Kizuna Aikido Dojo. It's situated in Villach in Carinthia, so in southern Austria, the place where everybody comes to have a good vacation, because it's so beautiful and the food is so good. So yeah, Kizuna Dojo is our dojo called, and inbewegungvillach.com is our website. The name is different from the dojo's name, because then there are also yoga and meditation offers by other teachers. And yeah, anybody interested is of course welcome to join the training. At the moment, yeah, there's nothing. So, and we also know nothing from our government, when it might be possible to open the doors. But yeah, please get in contact if interest is there. And then when it comes to this project, Moving into Soft Skills, that's easy to remember. It's movingintosoftskills.com. I think our website should be on already. And we are publishing both of our outputs now in the spring. And we will also be offering a multiplier event. At the moment, we were thinking about offering it online. And then, not only explaining about the project, but also doing something concrete. So that would also be a possibility to get a small taste of what we have produced in the project.
Thank you, Outi. It's been a real pleasure to talk to you and to see how things evolve when we spend time together. It was really, really a pleasure, and it's so nice to we could talk for 2 hours more, kind of, because new things just come up. Yeah, and I really hope to see you soon, maybe in Vienna, as you said, in the near future, and to keep our conversation going.
Yeah.
And so thank you for coming, and I hope you you also took something from our shared time.
I actually wanted to thank you once more, because now it's been no Aikido for several months now, but now talking about it, makes me want to practice again. It's like, yes, all those nice things. I want to do it.
Super. Great, Outi. So good night, and until the next time.
Yeah. Good night, Matan. Greetings to your family.
For more movement-related content and educational training programs, visit our website at www.movementlab.eu.